This article deals with the Portuguese Order of Knighthood. For the Spanish branch, see Order of Santiago. The military Order of St. James of the Sword is a Portuguese order of chivalry. History. The Order of St. James was founded in León, Castile circa 1170. It was probably originally founded as an order of Augustinian canons regular to escort pilgrims to the shrine of St. James the Greater in Santiago of Compostela in Galicia, but King Ferdinand II of Leon soon set it to garrison the southern frontiers of Leon against the Almohads of Al-Andalus. In 1170, Ferdinand II granted the new order the castles of Caceres and Monfragüe, which had been confiscated from Gerald the Fearless in 1169, and would make further donations thereafter. The new Leonese order was soon operating in neighboring kingdoms. His nephew, King Alfonso VIII of Castile, granted them the castles of Mora and Oreja in 1171, and merged the arriving Knights of Santiago with the older Castilian Brotherhood of Knights of Avila in 1172. In January 1174, Alfonso VIII granted them the citadel of Ucla, which would later serve as the headquarters of the Order of Santiago as a whole after the reunification of the Leon and Castile in 1230. A Portuguese branch emerged when King Afonso I of Portugal donated a Ruda dos Vinhas to the Order of Santiago. This was followed up by donations of the Castle of Monsanto and Abrantes. Given the poor relations between Afonso and Ferdinand II, the arrival of the Leonese order in Portugal is a little surprising. Some historians have conjectured Afonso was trying to exploit a quarrel between Order's Grand Master Pedro Fernandez and King Ferdinand II, but it is likely that the Order's entry was part of some diplomatic agreement between the two kings. Nonetheless, the donation documents explicitly name Rodrigo Alvarez as the administrator of all three Portuguese donations. Although a founding Knight of Santiago, Rodrigo Alvarez was known to be dissatisfied with its rules. So it is possible Afonso may have been trying to encourage a switch of schism in the order already at this stage. The foundation of the Order of The in 1175-76 reveal Afonso's keen interest in a Portugal-based order. Whatever the intentions of the original invitation, the Santiago Knights evidently did not meet Afonso's expectations. The crown took back Monsanto in 1174, and in 1179 Afonso expelled the Order of Santiago from Portugal and cancelled all the donations. As a consequence of a war that erupted between Portugal and Leon that year, the Order of Santiago would only return to Portugal in 1186, after Afonso I's death. The establishment of the Order of Santiago in Leon, Castile and Portugal was endorsed by Papal Legate Cardinal Hyacinthus of Ocado on a visit to Iberia in 1172-73. The approval of the order was confirmed 3 years later by Pope Alexander III in a bull issued July 1175. Reconquista. In 1186, King Sancho I of Portugal donated to the returning Order of Santiago the Portuguese dominions of Palmela, Almada and Alcácer do Sal. But in 1190-91, all three citadels were conquered in an offensive led by the Almohad Caliph Yaqub al-Mansur. They were recovered sometime between 1194 and 1204. The Order of Santiago established its Portuguese headquarters at Palmela shortly before 1210, and definitively by 1212. One of the more notable of Portuguese Santiago Knights was Pio Pérez Correia, Between 1234 to 1242, Correa led the conquest of much of the southerly Moorish dominions of Baixo Alentejo and the Algarve. In 1242, Pío Pérez Correa was elevated to Grand Master of the Order of Santiago, the only known Portuguese to have held the supreme title of the Castilian-based order. In 1249, Pío Pérez Correa and the Order of Santiago helped Afonso III of Portugal sweep up the final Moorish possessions in the Algarve. The possessions of the Order of Santiago in Portugal were expanded and confirmed by Afonso III in 1255. After the death of Correa in 1275, the Order of Santiago returned firmly into Castilian hands. Thus, in 1288, King Denis of Portugal separated the Portuguese branch from the Castilian Leonese order. This was confirmed by Pope John XXII in 1320. Commenders. The Order of Santiago possessed many domains granted by the Portuguese crown, almost all of them south of the Tagus River, clustered in the Sado region and Lower Alentejo. As the most southerly of the four Portuguese military orders, the Santiago Knights were the first frontline against incursions from the Moorish Algarve in the 13th century. These domains were partitioned into commenders, and granted by the order in commendam to a Santiago Knight entrusted with the obligation of defending them. After the completion of the conquest of the Algarve, the commenders continued to be a source of revenue for the order, granted to distinguished individual knights of the order, still contingent on military service, and run according to the order's regulations. In principle, the commendador was just a temporary manager of the order's property, although over time some commendadors treated the commender as their own property. The vast size and compactness of the domains of the Order of Santiago, its self-contained system of knights and commenders, and the extensive privileges of the order, including civil and criminal jurisdiction over these domains, has led some commentators to refer to it as a state within a state. The Grand Masters of the order were among the most powerful men in Portugal, and commendadors stood at the peak of rural society in the districts. By the 15th century, the large commenders of the Order of Santiago were Arruda and Santos, then Palmela, Setúbal, Sicibra, Cabrera, Alcázar de Sal, Toro, Grândola, Ferreira, Santiago.The, Cace, Acutem, Sines, Aljustral, Messejana, Casaval, Garvo, Castroverde, Metola, Almodóvar, and Casella. Royal princes during the 1383 to 1385 Portuguese succession crisis. D. Fernando Afonso de Albuquerque, Master of the Order of Santiago in Portugal, backed the candidacy of John, Master of Aviz, and served briefly as John's ambassador to the English court. Upon becoming king, having distributed much royal and seized land to reward his supporters, King John I of Portugal was left with a slim royal domain, insufficient to maintain his many sons with princely households. But the vast wealthy domains of the military orders were an alternative option. John promptly set his mind on acquiring the masterships of all the principal military orders in Portugal for his family. In 1418, John secured the mastership of the Order of Santiago for his son, John of Reguengos, the future constable of Portugal. In 1420, he secured the mastership of the Order of Christ for another son, Henry the Navigator. After his death in 1433, John I's own Order of Aviz was passed to a third son, Ferdinand the Saint. The mastership of the three major orders, Santiago, Christ and Aviz, would remain in the hands of princes of the royal family for much of the next century. After the death of John of Reguengos in 1442, his brother, the regent Prince Peter of Coimbra, appointed John's son Diogo Diogo as Master of Santiago, but Diogo died within a year, so Peter passed the mastership on to his nephew, Infante Ferdinand, Duke of Bihar, the younger brother of King Afonso V of Portugal. This was confirmed by Pope Eugene IV in 1444. In the 1452 bull Ex Apostolis Sedis, Pope Nicholas V confirmed once more Ferdinand's appointment and put a definitive end to questions about the autonomy of the Portuguese branch of Santiago. At the death of Henry the Navigator in 1460, his title of Duke of Viseu and the mastership of the Order of Christ passed on to Infante Ferdinand, Henry's designated heir. Ferdinand was in an unusual position of holding two major military orders, but this was ratified by Pope Pius II in 1461. At Infante Ferdinand's death in 1470, all his titles, including both the Orders of Christ and Santiago, were inherited by his eldest son, John, Duke of Viseu. But the sickly John died just 2 years later, in 1472. The mastership of the orders was subsequently separated again. John's younger brother, Diogo, Duke of Viseu, became Master of the Order of Christ, while the Order of Santiago passed to his brother-in-law, Infante John, the eldest son and heir of Afonso V of Portugal. With the ascension of Infante John as King John II of Portugal in 1481, the fortunes of the Order of Santiago rose with him. At the time, the Order of Christ, with the vast possessions, was the richest and most powerful military order in Portugal. To combat their influence, John II, a centralizing prince, doted on and deployed his Order of Santiago at their expense. The Order of Christ had been out of the explorations business since the death of Prince Henry in 1460. As a result, the Order of Santiago supplied a greater share of the knights for the slate of new expeditions organized by John II in the 1480s. The death of John II's only legitimate son and heir, Prince Afonso, in 1491 threw the kingdom into a succession crisis, as it left John II with only one legitimate successor, his cousin and brother-in-law, Manuel, Duke of Bihar. Manuel of Bihar had become the Master of the Order of Christ in 1484. John II did not trust Manuel, and suspected he might fritter away his hard-won gains. As a result, John II launched a campaign to legitimize his natural son, George de Lancaster, as royal heir. From Pope Innocent VIII, John II received authorization to appoint George de Lancaster as the Master of the Order of Santiago in April 1492. However, the Pope refused to legitimize his birth, and as a result, at the death of John II in 1495, Duke Manuel of Bihar ascended as King Manuel I of Portugal. In the first decade of Manuel's reign, George de Lancaster was the leader of what might be called the political opposition to Manuel, composed mostly of loyalists of the late John II. The Order of Santiago was his power base, and its castle in Palmela served as something akin to an alternate rival court. The Order of Santiago played a leading role in the early India expeditions, a legacy project from the reign of John II. The Vasco da Gama, Paulo da Gama, D. Francisco de Almeida, D. Afonso de Albuquerque and Duarte de Meneses were leading knights of the Order of Santiago. It is reported by chronicler João de Barros that just before his departure for India in 1497, King Manuel I of Portugal presented Vasco da Gama with his personal standard, not the familiar armillary sphere flag later associated with Manuel, but rather the banner of the Order of Christ, of which Manuel was the Grand Master. But chronicler Gaspar Correa reports that as soon as the ships left sight of Lisbon harbour, Paulo da Gama pulled the royal standard down from the mast. Evidently the Gammas took the king's gesture as a calculated slight against the beloved Santiago. Nonetheless, in subsequent years Manuel.The would set his Order of Christ to poach the Knights of the Order of Santiago. In January 1505, Manuel managed to coax D. Francisco de Almeida to abandon Santiago and move over to the Order of Christ. The Vasco da Gama himself eventually did the switch in 1507. Afonso de Albuquerque, by contrast, refused. He was buried in his Santiago vestments. Master George de Lancaster spent much of his career trying to defend the Order of Santiago against Manuel's encroachments. In May 1505, he actually managed to secure a royal order prohibiting knights from leaving his orders without his express permission. But Manuel soon obtained from Pope Alexander VI 2 bulls to undermine him, one from July 1505, giving the King of Portugal the right to dispose of the property of all 3 orders, another in January 1506, authorizing knights to move freely from other orders to the Order of Christ. In 1509, D. George de Lancaster introduced a new set of rules for the Order of Santiago, overhauling its administration in a centralized fashion, bringing it closer in line with the rules of the Spanish Brethren. This was done perhaps to gain the support of the Spanish monarchy and the Pope, but to no avail. In 1516, Manuel secured from Pope Leo X the authority to appoint George's successor as Grand Master of Santiago. Manuel died in 1521, and was succeeded by his son John III of Portugal, who kept up the effort to erode the Order of Santiago. When George de Lancaster died in July 1550, John III received a bull from Pope Julius III a couple of weeks later, appointing him personally as the master of both the Order of Santiago and the Order of Aviz. This was followed up by a second bull, Praeclara Carissimi, issued by the Pope under great diplomatic pressure by John III in December 1551, appointing the kings of Portugal as masters in perpetuity of all 3 military orders, Christ, Santiago and Aviz, thus bringing an end to the independence of the military orders in Portugal. Later years, Pope Pius VI and the Queen Mary I reformed the order into a secular institution. In 1834, when the civil government of Portugal became anti-Catholic after the defeat of King Miguel in the Civil War, under the constitutional monarchy the order lost its properties. The ancient military orders were transformed by the liberal constitution and subsequent legislation into mere orders of merit. The privileges which once had been an essential part of the membership of the old military orders also ceased. In 1910, when Portuguese monarchy ended, the Republic of Portugal abolished all the orders except the Order of the Tower and Sword. However, in 1917, at the end of the World War I, some of these orders were re-established as mere orders of merit to reward outstanding services to the state. The office of Grand Master belonging to the head of state, the President of the Republic. The military order of St. James, together with the other Portuguese orders of merit, had its statutes revised on several occasions during the First Republic, then in 1962, and again in 1986. The military order of St. James, together with the military orders of Christ and of Aviz, formed the group of the ancient military orders, governed by a chancellor and a council of 8 members, appointed by the President of the Republic, to assist him as Grand Master in all matters concerning the administration of the order. The order, despite its name, can be conferred to Portuguese and foreigners for outstanding services to science, literature or art. The highest grade of the order, that of Grand Collar, is a special award, conferred only to foreign heads of state. Grades. The Order of St. James of the Sword, as awarded by the Portuguese government today, comes in 6 classes. Grand Collar, which wears the badge of the Order on a special collar, and the Star of the Order in gold on the left chest. Grand Cross, which wears the badge of the Order on a collar, or on a sash on the right shoulder, and the Star of the Order in gold on the left chest. Grand Officer, which wears the badge of the Order on a necklet, and the Star of the Order in gold on the left chest. Commander, which wears the Star of the Order in silver on the left chest. Officer, which wears the badge of the Order on a ribbon with rosette on the left chest. Knight-Dame, which wears the badge of the Order on a plain ribbon on the left chest. Insignia. The badge of the Order is a gilt cross with red enamel, similar to the Order's emblem illustrated here, but with a longer lower arm, and is surrounded by a wreath of green enameled palm leaves. A white enameled scroll, bearing the legend, chancelaria art, is located at the bottom of the badge. During the monarchy, the badge was topped by the Sacred Heart of Christ. The Star of the Order has 22 asymmetrical arms of raised in gilt for Grand Collar, Grand Cross and Grand Officer, and in silver for Commander. The central disc is in white enamel, with a miniature of the modern badge in it. During the monarchy, the Sacred Heart of Christ was placed at the top of the star. The ribbon of the Order is plain lilac.